Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Rogue Deck Chronicles. I am Dean, and once again, I have Devin with me.
Hey, everybody. Hopefully, everyone is having a wonderful Valentine's week.
I know me and my wife, we have some plans this weekend. We're trying to keep it a little like low, lay back. We have a lot of stuff coming up the next couple weeks. But yeah, it's just been a fun week of Pokemon for me. Um, Played in a challenge yesterday, so that was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Went 1-3,
But
but
you have your challenge limit, so you can just have fun at every challenge for the rest of the season, right?
basically, like I got one first place and three second places. So yeah, I could max out my challenges, but at that point, I'm only gaining 9 CP, and it's really not much at the end of the day. So we have a chat with me and my friends at my card shop, and I'm like, okay, I can either play a fun deck, somewhat serious deck, or a really serious deck. What should I play? And then, of course, they all said, play the fun deck. So I play Lapras Yalga.
Of course.
I won my first round, so I'll take that. And then the other rounds were actually pretty close. Like, I didn't get, like, destroyed or anything. It's just, we were joking in round two. I forgot someone was like, "Oh, I'm playing against weakness." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm weak to consistency," and everyone's just like, "What the heck?" Like,
They didn't pick up what you're trying to say.
oh, they did. They just bust out laughing. It's like, "Why are you playing that deck then?" I'm like, "Because I'm just here to have fun. Like, I don't even care anymore." But it was a fun time. Um, our buddy John actually was out there too, and he actually got second place. So good for him. We'll talk about his deck later on because we are gonna talk about it in relation to the regional this past weekend. Um, and then right before recording, I was getting my deck ready for GLC. We have that tomorrow at another card shop that I go to. So I was getting that ready before I head out to bed. But what about you, Devin? Anything fun in the Pokemon sphere for you?
So, Pokemon Home had an update yesterday, and they released both Keldeo and Miltank as shiny.
I saw
So,
that.
all of my shiny hunting friends, we've been hitting each other up for trade in touch trades, and actually after recording tonight, I'm actually doing a bulk trade session with a friend of mine to get the one for Meltan done, because we actually were planning to do this bulk trading session like a week ago, and we had no idea what the mythical would have been, and we didn't even know if there would be a distribution. He just had this hunch, and he was so right. So I'm like, I have Let's Go Pikachu. He goes, well, I have Let's Go Eevee. He said, touch trade for exclusives, and he trade evolves. He goes, deal. I'm like, okay. I'm like, all right, cool. We're gonna do that. And then they did both Keldeo and Meltan on the same. So I'm like, I guess we're all going to be going back to Sword and Shield this weekend, huh? And everyone's like, yeah.
I think I actually have those filled out in Sword and Shield. I have to go check. I haven't touched that game in such a long time.
I would say Sword and Shield's been out for 5+ years. So yeah. Um, you can get shiny Meltan and Melmetal in Pokemon Go during certain events. I actually got my shinies during those the most recent one, like, which, and I say most recent, it's almost 5 months ago at this point. But the Keldeo is the first time this has ever been shiny available in any way, shape, or form. So a whole bunch of shiny hunters are freaking out over it.
Yeah, I know a lot of these mythicals, a lot of Pokemon are still shiny locked. I know in the TCG realm, that's like, oh, it's not a big deal. But for those who play the video game, gaining shinies is so important.
Yes. And everyone goes like, "What does shiny Volcanion or shiny Hoopa look like?" And everyone goes, "Have you ever played the TCG?" Like, that's how people know the shinies exist.
Actually, I don't even know what those Pokemon look like. I wasn't around
Um,
for those shinies in the game.
that's right. You weren't around when shining Pokemon was a thing.
Like, there's some shiny Pokemon in the current, like the last couple years. Because
No, no, no.
in
Shining Pokemon. So Shining Pokemon was a subset of shiny mythicals and shiny legendaries that they put in, but they were in the alternative rare slot in packs.
Ah,
So they are
gotcha.
all shiny variants of the mythicals, and they are all right. Like the Shining Volcanion does spread damage for 2 water and a colorless or something crazy like that. So like most of them didn't really see much play. But that's where everyone kind of saw the shinies for those Pokemon
Okay.
because you can't see them in the TCG or in the video game at all.
I think the only shining Pokemon I've seen is Genesect, and that just because that is
Mm-hmm.
so good in GLC.
Yes, it was Accelerate or no, it doubles Grass Energy, right?
Something like that. I'll probably figure it out tomorrow during GLC because I'm sure someone's going to play a grass deck because that's one of the most powerful decks. Which I'm excited to see grass because I play metal and I get.
Oh
And,
yeah, you resist it.
oh yeah, it screws up their math so much. I love it.
Anyway, enough of just random Pokemon talk. So let's talk about the big talking point in the trading card game realm from the weekend, which was the regional in Merida.
Yeah, like this no-name person that only went to what, one or two regionals in this season came out of nowhere and won the whole entire event. Like, I'm really glad that these like players can come out of the woodwork and just like get the world's invite.
The fact that this is his only second tournament and then what you said is completely accurate, except for the heavy level of sarcasm, is amazing, by the way.
Yeah, so those who don't know, Merida was this past weekend and it was won by none other than Azul Garcia Griego. He is definitely a well-known player. He didn't come out of the woodwork. Everyone knows who he is. He's a big content creator in our realm. But
This is his second regional of the year, which is bonkers.
regional, not IC. Actually, I'm not even sure if he went to LAIC.
He did not.
Yeah, so he
did
went
not.
to Sacramento.
I'm looking at his top tournament finishes. He only has 2 tournament finishes for regionals, which is Sacramento and Merida. I
Yeah,
don't think he went to any ICs this year.
if he did, he
Nope.
didn't make day 2.
Nope, he has no results other than those 2.
But this makes his 8th regional win, which makes him the player with the most regional wins ever. Which he was
Really?
he was tied with Pramrot. They both had 7. Now he has 8.
How many does Tord have?
I don't know, but Tord has more IC wins though.
Yeah, Tord is really known for winning the ICs. I will say that.
So yeah, so Azul won his 8th regional, and now he can just go back to streaming and not worry about going to any other tournaments because he's already going to Anaheim,
Which is like down the road from where he lives, so it's like the most win-win thing for him ever.
Yeah, and so he played none other than Maridon, which honestly I'm surprised by, because him and his playtesting group, they're not known to really play these like beat stick style decks. They're more analytical. They like the more complex thinking routes of playing decks. So the fact that they identified that Maridon was the best play is very interesting to me.
I mean, it still fits what you just described. Yes, it has those big beat stick, like they're going to smash you over the head to damage calculators, but it's a box deck. Like, if you look at the list, this isn't a straightforward deck by any means. This is a electric box for sure.
Which is standard Maridon nowadays. I will say the one exclusion that a lot of people have been talking about is that he doesn't play that Zapdos from Pokemon Go where it adds 10 damage to your lightning attacks.
I remember when I played an electric box like a couple years ago, and I actually was playing around with this probably about 3 or 4 months before like all the electric support came out when we went to Orlando Regional together.
Yeah.
And that Zapdos, I will say that Zapdos never felt good playing because it never really fixed the math the way you were hoping it would.
Which is interesting because second place was Gouging Fire, which has 230 HP. Anti-V has 230 HP. So it would have made his win easier, ironically enough. But he pulled it off at the end of the day, and in second place was Gouging Fire, another American player. But this one is actually a not known name. It was Mauricio Patino. I've never heard of him before. I'm clicking on his stuff on Limitless, and he has 3 top finishes.
All with Gouging Fire.
Yeah, and it's all this season, and that's it. So he goes top 128 in 2 regionals, and then all of a sudden he gets second place at Merida. And that's all he has. So congrats to him. Like, he finally got his breakout session. He is showing that Gouging Fire is a deck to watch out for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I will also mention not really a lot of Gardevoir or Lugia in the top table or in the top results.
Not really. I mean, yes, there is a Guardian top 8, and then some more in top 16. The pair with that observation is the fact that the highest Regidrago was only 54th. Like, Regidrago just fell off a cliff.
It's that Bidoof, man. Everyone's scared of it. And it does slow down Regidrago so much versus Miraidon, Gouging Fire, Gardevoir. They're all not necessarily Bidoof proof, but they can go turns without playing items. And that's what makes it. That's where the difference comes with, because Drago really depended on getting your energy switches, getting your Pokemon search out, and getting your board set up, and they didn't really have draw. It was all based on getting the resources from your deck using items, and the format has changed to where you need to be able to play without items to do well in big tournaments now.
I think that parallels very similar. Like, you see the rise of Dragon Ball.
Oh yeah,
because of that, because it can search for itself.
Yeah, and luckily it had supporters that weren't played before, like Lance, that you can get the cards you need with using the supporter if you get item locked. So they had the resources. Granted, is it optimal? Not really, but they made it work. I know even Gardevoir is even transitioning to something completely, no, not completely different, but it is a little different, because at the challenge I played to yesterday, I went against a Gardevoir deck that had 3 Monkey Dories.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is a big shift.
Yeah, and they put 90. I wasn't paying attention, and the player was like, yeah, I'm going to put 90 on, I forgot what Pokemon on my bench. I'm like, 90? He was like, yeah, I have 3 monkeys in play. I'm like, oh, I didn't even see you do that.
You had 3 monkeys, and each of them, one of them had a darkness energy on it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yep, because they played 3 monkeys with 3 dark energies.
Jeez.
So,
but I think, yeah, go back to these deck lists. Like, it's just so interesting to watch the shift. I understand that Bidoof and item block is a thing, but it's just so interesting. Like, maybe it's because, like, obviously the Miraidon kind of did not really rely on the items, but it was very much it uses almost all the items it needs, like turn 1, turn 2, and then could care less for items for the rest of the game. Gouging Fire really prefers the items but doesn't rely on them. A lot of stuff here is non-items that really kind of pushes it forward, other than obviously the setup items, and we'll kind of talk about what setup items are later today with our how to train a rogue section. But it's just so interesting, the shift mentally in deck building because of one card. Like, it's like, I never, like, when you said, oh yeah, it's because of a duo, I'm like, oh, that makes sense, but that's such a knee-jerk reaction to a singular card.
and it's not even that, like, yeah, item lock is strong, but if you look at the card, like, with the text and all that, it's a baby Pokemon, 30 HP, free retreat. Like, it should be easily counterable,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not. Oh, it is, but it's like it slows you down so much. It it's at the point where, like, yeah, the meta completely changed since prismatic evolutions became legal. We're not seeing the same. We're seeing similar decks in the top, but even then, those decks have adjusted so much as well.
Yeah, no, definitely they have. But so we talked about Gouging Fire. I thought that was an interesting deck. Obviously, it became runner up. So, like you said, it had its coming out party. The other deck that I really liked and I saw in the day two was this Future Iron Hands deck.
Oh yeah,
And I was so intrigued. I looked into it before we started recording today, and I was like, I like this deck. Like I would play this deck on top of it being fairly cheap. $60 is a fairly cheap deck nowadays. I was like, this is kind of cool.
yeah. As I mentioned earlier, like our buddy John, he got second place at the challenge yesterday, and he played this deck, this list. Well, 58 of the cards in this list. He had to switch out some cards due to excess, like he didn't have them. But he went up to me afterwards. He's like, "Yeah, I got second." I'm like, of course, he's looking at me. He's like, "You did bad." I'm like, "Yeah, but you knew I was going to do bad. Look at the deck I was playing." But he was like, "Yeah, like the deck ran smooth." It's like if I had these two cards, which he was missing the stadiums, the lively stadiums, and none of us had them, so he adjusted accordingly. He's like, "Yeah, if I just had those two stadiums, I probably would have went 4-0."
Yeah, I mean, the Lively Stadium is a big deal for this deck. So for those who don't know, Lively Stadium is a stadium card that says each basic Pokemon in play, both yours and your opponents, get plus 30 HP. So that's a big deal. 30 HP is a big math changer for sure.
Yeah, especially with cards like Blood Moon Ursaluna EX, where you hit for 240. Well, if we look at the Iron Hands EX, it's 230 HP. So if you get the 30 HP buff, you're at 260. You're surviving that big impact, like for closing game or something like
And
that.
also, you'd be surviving Radiant Charizard, and a lot of, honestly, just a lot of other attacks. Like all the evolutions attacks are around a 230 number. So going up to 260 is a big deal.
Yeah, for sure. But if you look at the list on Limitless, this player, it's fairly consistent. I would say it's like 3-4 of almost everything.
Mm-hmm.
You play 15 energy in the list. You have the Mew EX for your pivot option, the Iron Bundle to help with your Gust. You do play 3 bosses orders, so you're essentially having 4 boss. Yeah, it's very consistent. I like the Maridon for the setup where with peak acceleration, you hit for 40, and obviously if you have the damage modifiers, you can hit for more and even get a KO. I did play a version of this probably about a year or so ago when it first came out. I actually really liked the deck a lot. It is straightforward. I did play a more boxier version. I played Iron Thorns in my list. I think I played one of the Iron Leaves, but that's when Charizard was way more prevalent than it is now. But the skeleton is essentially the same. It's start your baby Maridon, try to get Iron Hands EX out, a couple Iron Crowns, and just power up your bench and attack, attack, attack.
Yeah, I would say a deck like this, for one, the budget, $60 is a very cheap deck to make for a competitive level deck. The most expensive cards are the Arvins, the Fezandipiti, and the Iron Hands. Everything else is fairly easy to get a hold of. In terms of the cost, and then also in terms of the strategy, I would recommend this to a new player and allow them to kind of learn and mature with the game with a deck like this.
Yeah, I can see that. It is very straightforward, but it does hit hard. It's a deck where I feel like if you take this to a challenge, you will have a good time. I can't say that you're going to win because obviously it didn't win the tournament. It got 83rd, so top 128. So, but it is straightforward, easy to play in my opinion, or easier to play. And I think it's when I used to play it, it was fun. Just trying to go for those early donks if you can. If not, you have the a little bit of complexity in your strategy of when to use certain things. The prime catcher is very good. If you have to, you could play the reboot pod. That's more if you want to go more in the box style, adding in the iron leaves or iron thorns or something like that. But the prime catcher is a very good card for this deck. For Legends, for Techno Radar, it's very consistent, very straightforward, and this will be like you said, perfect for a newer player.
Yeah, and I think again the idea of this is a subset type of deck. So you have the future Pokemon status. As long as we stick within a Scarlet Violet video game era of the cards, you're still going to get probably more of these type of cards in the future. And you could have slowly evolved this deck to be and adapt this deck for sets to come, which is always a good thing for a new player.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, those were the two unique decks that we saw coming out of this weekend. Everything else is the same stuff that we always see. Um, I will say, even though Gouging Fire got second place, it was the only Gouging Fire in day 2.
Yes.
So that was interesting, and I'm glad that happened. Like seeing, because typically you see these one-off decks are usually at the lower tables, and seeing him almost winning the tournament. Like I watched the stream or the VOD of it the next day, and if it wasn't for his bad opening game 3, he probably would have had a decent shot, but he just had a dead hand, and Azul just donked him. But
Yeah,
other than
I
that,
mean, that happens.
yeah, it happens. It sucks to happen where to determine if you're going to go to Worlds or not, but I'm sure he's going to do well enough to get his invite.
Yeah, and that's the interesting part there, where as long as players like Azul and other regional winners just get themselves out of the contention pool, it opens up opportunities for someone who had a really good day or really good weekend to really get an opportunity to go to the next level, which is Worlds.
Yeah, exactly. So, with seeing the results of Merida being the first major tournament with prismatic evolutions, we have a special event coming up this weekend in Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see these results impacting this special event in Puerto Rico, or do you think it does change anything?
Honestly, I don't think anything's really going to change. I think the amount of Dragapult's going to be there, the amount of Miraidon. I think Miraidon is a deck that's here to stay. Gardevoir is really not going to go anywhere. I would like to see, and I'm interested to see if Regidrago gets an adjustment to see if players can get it to be more item proofed, for lack of better terms. But in terms of like those big consistent decks, like we said, the Dragapult, Gardevoir, the Miraidon, even Lugia, Archeops, Raging Bolts, they're there. I hope more people play Gouging Fire because of obviously the recency effect. But I don't know. I really don't. But what I do know is the consistent stuff is going to be there again.
Yeah, I I think with Miraidon winning, it's this is probably completely biased, but I think more people will be wanting to play the Poison Trap Ghost deck. I only say that because Cloth hits it for weakness, and when I don't know, whenever I was playing that deck and I went against a Miraidon player, I had a little more confidence because I knew I was hitting for the weakness, and it was there. I was winning the prize trade because I was getting 2 prizes. They're only gaining 1. I do know that the newer Trap Ghost Poison deck only plays one Cloths. So maybe we see more of that, but at the same time, I can see that being like a 50-50. Whoever gets the first two prizes is essentially going to win that matchup. Um, I do agree with you. I think more people will probably experiment with gouging fire because of the success it had in Mexico. Um, it's new toy syndrome. Even though we knew about this deck, it didn't had. It wasn't until now it had its like moment to shine.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say we'll probably see a little more gouging fire, but I think it's going to be a Garvar and Regidrago event all day, every day. Those two decks are just way too powerful right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping because of Maridon winning, there will be a swing in people wanting to do fighting based decks. So like the Conkeldor or even Okidogi. Let's just try to get for counter, but then you open yourself up for basically a loss to Gardevoir. So again, that Gardevoir piece is going to play such an important factor.
Yeah, and Garvar's already shifting. They're taking out most of their attackers. They're not playing the Drifloons anymore. Maybe they're playing the Screamtails. But like when I played against the Garvar player, granted he's a really good Garvar player and made day 2 at Merida, he did a lot of his damage on me by just like spread. Yeah, he attacked me, but he was taking out. He took 4 prizes on me by just like manipulating damage left and right. And that's the type of deck that Garvar is turning into.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sign of a good deck. A sign of a good archetype is when you're able to adapt from set to set. So it's interesting to see how this format is going to adapt even further, for sure. And we, like you said, we have Puerto Rico this week. The week after that, we have
EUIC.
EOIC, Vancouver very shortly after. So there's a lot of different events coming up that we can definitely see how the player base is shifting based on just results week over week.
Yeah, I know. Also, a lot of players in our area of the country, we're looking at Atlanta already because currently Atlanta just opened up for the regional, and I'm seeing people in my shop's Discord like, "Oh, I'm going to Atlanta. Oh, I'm in. I got in." So but that's post rotation. We'll talk about Atlanta in a couple months once we get journeys together. But enough about the major tournaments that happened this weekend. Puerto Rico will do its thing, and we'll talk about that next week. But I think we should continue our How to Train a Rogue series. What do you think?
Absolutely. And I think this week, especially with the decks we just talked about, I think this week's theme couldn't be timed any better.
So what do you mean by that? Like, what are we going to talk about this week? I know last couple of weeks we talked about the Pokemon that we want to include in a deck. So the first week was about who is the main star, what is the archetype based around of, and then last week we talked about, okay, we got the main actor, we got the main person. How do we support that Pokemon with the other cast members? So we looked at Sylveon and how different Pokemon supported what Sylveon wanted to do. So now this week, what evolution are we going to be looking at?
So the evolution we're going to focus on is going to be Flareon, which always has gotten the short end of the stick, but mostly because of its typing. It being a fire type has always been weak to water. Water's always been really good in almost any other any format you ever really played. But with this week and the kind of theme we're picking with this deck is all about how do you get your main actor and how do you get the support out efficiently and correctly in order to set up your strategy.
Yeah, so we have the cast set up for our decks. So in this week we're going to be talking about Flareon and all the lineup we have to make Flareon work. But none of this matters if we can't get the Pokemon into play. So,
Exactly.
Devin, in this deck, how did we do that?
So before we go into the actual specifics of the Flareon deck and the deck of the week, let's talk about what a lot of people like to call ball search. We're just going to really generically call it Pokemon search because it's more than just Pokeballs and ball-based cards nowadays. Back in the day, it's like you got your Great Ball, you got your Ultra Ball, you got your Pokeball. But now when it comes to Pokemon search in this era of Pokemon, it's more than just putting in 4 Ultra Ball and 4 Nest Ball and 4 Great Ball in a deck. Like, you have a lot of options. So let's look at the common Pokemon search cards that almost no matter what archetype you're ever going to build, you're kind of automatically putting those in. And then let's talk about the situational Pokemon search cards, especially with this new EX format that we're kind of navigating our way through currently and then for at least the next year or so. So obviously, Dean, if I say, all right, we're going to build a deck, what item cards would we put in? What would you automatically just write down on a piece of paper without even thinking what the Pokemon are?
The three in this current format, the 3 cards I would automatically think of is Nest Ball, Ultra Ball, and Hisuian Heavy Ball. Those are must includes in any deck that I build, especially if we are using a lot of basic Pokemon.
Absolutely. And I think the first one you said, the first 2, Ultra Ball, Nest Ball, they're just going to happen. Like, there is no way that you can build a deck in any way, shape, or form and say, I'm not going to use these cards. That's 8 cards out of your 60. You know you're going to pencil in every single time. And let's talk about the differences between those 2 cards because they are not the same.
No, they're not, and they serve completely different purposes, and you have to know the minute differences with these cards, because if you have certain Pokemon, there's some abilities or effects that won't trigger if you use one card or the other card. So you have to really know the differences when you use these common ball searches.
Absolutely. So for those who are just getting into the game, Ultra Ball is a item card that says you discard 2 cards from your hand. It can be any 2 cards. And then you get to search your deck for any Pokemon you want, show it to your opponent, put it in your hand, and then shuffle your deck afterwards. So that allows you to get any card from your deck at the cost of 2 from hand. So it is what some card games will call -1, where you are going -1 in your hand size, but you are getting exactly what you want from a Pokemon side. So that is very important. The reason why going to the hand is important is just like Dean said. There are certain abilities on certain Pokemon that you have to play the card from your hand to the bench in order to be able to trigger those abilities. So we want to make sure we're putting stuff into our hand when we have the opportunity to do so. Now for Nest Ball is an item card that says search your deck for a basic Pokemon and then put it on straight to your bench from the deck. Shuffle your deck afterwards. So the key difference, like we talked about, is that bypasses the hand to bench ability step. So if you Nest Ball for a Lumineon V, for example, you will not be able to search for that supporter. If you Ultra Ball for a Lumineon V, you'll be able to trigger that ability to get that supporter for your search.
Yeah, and it's knowing these differences and how your cards play out. It's really important on when you choose to use different ball search. In this instance, we're talking about Nest Ball versus Ultra Ball. So in the beginning of the game, when you kind of want to just get your basic Pokemon set up, Nest Balling a couple out isn't a big deal. It's actually very preferred. But if you need, like, oh man, my head, I just need a certain supporter. I don't know what to do, and all you have is a Nest Ball. You may a newer player may be tempted, like, oh, I can Nest Ball for Lumineon or Lumineon V, and then use Luminous Sign to get my supporter. However, because you're not going from your hand, the effect doesn't trigger. I see it all the time with newer players. They will do that, and you're like, what's going on? Like, why can't I get my supporter? So knowing how the different item cards interact with your deck, that just comes with time, that comes with practice, and just knowing your deck well and knowing what the cards are out in the card pool. So those are the 2 main ball searches, really. I mentioned Hisuian Heavy Ball. just because a lot of times you play these one of cards in your deck that you need, and they're stuck in your prizes. And right now, this is it's the only way to really interact with your prizes. Play the Hisuian Heavy Ball, look at your prizes, and if you see a basic Pokemon there, you can just grab it, put that Heavy Ball into your prizes, shuffle up your prizes, and put the prizes back down, and now you have another resource that you can go and help out your bench with as well.
Yeah, Hisuian Heavy Ball was such a good card when it was printed. And I'm going to be very sad when that card rotates because it allowed, like you said, it's one of the few cards that allows you to interact with your prizes back to your hand and allows you to kind of stabilize from a different resource area. Because obviously, searching your deck is the number one way you get your resources. Secondly, would be the discard pile, but a lot of players always forget that the prize card area is a resource area as well. And you just have to find ways to manage those resources from that area, and Hisuian Heavy Ball was always the number one way you could do that.
Oh yeah, like if you played the Poison Trap Ghost deck, you are very familiar with Heavy Ball because it's one of the few decks that actually play two. Most decks only play one because once you have it and put it back and put it into your prizes, you can reuse that resource over and over again. But as soon as it hits your discard, it's out of play. So with the Poison Trap Ghost, we played a lot of one-ofs, so I was so used to getting a Heavy Ball within my first 2 turns of the game, and it became a very important resource for me to get my deck going.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Another Pokemon search card that I always consider, and again, I say consider because this is not a must-add because it depends on what deck concept you want to go, is now Buddy-Buddy Poffin. So Buddy-Buddy Poffin is a item card that allows you to search your deck for 2 Pokemon with 70 HP or less, and then put them onto the bench. So again, you have to know that subtext of bench versus hand in this, but really we're talking about, especially in this Scarlet Violet era of a meta or even just a card pool, of your baby Pokemon and your a setup Pokemon that really go into building up your stage 1s and stage 2s.
Yeah, and I think one warning to give players with having this or considering this card into your deck, you have to know what Pokemon you're playing, because not all Pokemon have 70 HP or less. So
yes,
so if you want to play like Duraludon's 130. You're not getting anything in that deck with Buddy-Buddy Poffin. However, if you're playing a deck like Charizard EX or anything that has a basic Pokemon with multiple basic Pokemon with 70 HP or less, this is a must include in that deck because you're not only getting 1 Pokemon, but you're getting 2. And a lot of times that can matter on your setup if you're going to give them your attack. If somehow your attacker gets bossed up early on in the game and slow you down, you have another card ready to go on your bench.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. So, like, with this little series we were doing by picking the evolutions, like, I've been using Buddy-Buddy Poffin a lot because the Eevee, you want to make sure you got your Eevees in play. Well, the Eevee we use is typically 50 to 70 HP, regardless of which one you're really using. So it's a really good target card right there. Another thing that I want to mention with potential combination pieces is let's look at other ways we can search our Pokemon out. In this case, I want to focus on Fan Rotom. And Fan Rotom, it's because of its ability where you can, on your first turn only, that's a key piece. Again, we're reading the subtext of all the cards, right? It allows you to search your deck for up to 3 colorless Pokemon with 100 HP or less. So a really interesting, fun little combination is either you Nest Ball or you Buddy-Buddy turn 1, get that Fan Rotom straight to your bench, and then you can trigger Fan Rotom's ability to go search out more Pokemon. So that is your deck thinning component. That is your efficiency component. That is part of your setting up, because not only does Rotom help you search Pokemon, it also prevents you from being donked out, which I think is a very important piece to remember in this meta that we are in, because there's so many aggressive decks that can knock out turn 1. And it's just a piece of a combination that allows you to look up Pokemon. Now, obviously, Fan Rotom only works if you have colorless Pokemon, but in this meta, we have the Jewel Seeker Noctowl for Tera support. We have like what we're using. We're using EVs, so we want to find more EVs. There's a whole bunch of basic Pokemon in this current format, pre-rotation, that are 100 HP or less, that really, really love to see Fan Rotom get played turn 1.
Yeah, I would say if you're playing any Tera deck, having the Fan Rotom with the Noctowls and the Hoothoots, I wouldn't say it's a no-brainer, but it's a very good combo to get your board set up. Fan Rotom, get 2 Hootoots and a Noctowl out, put the Hootoots in play, and like you said, it helps get your bench full up so you can't get donked, and it's ultimately getting you resources for your next turn, because that Jewel Seeker ability, if you have a Tera Pokemon in play, is so important. I played the Fan Rotom with the Hootoots in my Lapras Dialga deck, and I can't run my deck without that. It helped me get all the missing pieces I needed for my turn 2 to attack with my Lapras when I needed it. And I'm not even playing a special Tera or anything like that, and it's such a key component of that deck. So having Pokemon that can get other Pokemon out and helps with your thinning of the deck. I know we haven't really talked about that concept a lot in this series, but there is a saying out there called thinning is winning. And what that means...
Deck thinning is deck winning. I loved it. I got that from Dragon Ball Super. I heard that when Dragon Ball Super first came out, and I went, oh my god. Keep in mind, I've been playing Pokemon for about 5 years at that point. And I went, that is perfect saying. I loved it. I always love when people say it.
Yeah, and it's... everyone's like, well, I don't want to get resources out of my head. I don't want to lose these resources. Like, you're not losing resources, but getting cards out and saving cards you need for the late game helps you draw to get those at the appropriate time, instead of, like, for example, boss's orders. You don't want that your first turn of the game most of the time. You'd rather see a setup card like Professor's Research or Arvin or something like that to get you the resources you need to get your bench set up. Mm-hmm. So we'll probably go and talk about more about deck thinning in future episodes, but the Fan Rotom really helps with that concept as well.
Absolutely. And then you mentioned the Tera Pokemon kind of archetypes, right? Another Pokemon search card is Tera Orb, where it allows you to search your deck for a Tera Pokemon and then put it in your hand and shuffle your deck. So another piece to that. Now we're going to be seeing Tera Pokemon for a little bit, let's be honest. That if you don't have 4 of those in your collection, I would highly recommend getting those. I mean, they're very easy to get a hold of. They're just too. Uncommon. Yeah, they're an uncommon. They're 20 cents at most, but you can get them. Just crack some Surging Sparks. I'm sure they're going to be in future product, especially if they keep on building Tera-based product. So I would say definitely get 4 of. It's going to help with any Tera Pokemon. And this one has a Tera Pokemon tag, not a basic or a stage 1 or a stage 2. So you can put this in any deck that really has a Tera theme around it for sure.
Yeah, and go on the concept of tag-specific search. Just do your research based on whatever deck you're building. See if there is anything specific to what you're playing. So in this instance, we're talking about Tera Pokemon specifically with Flareon. But another good example is going back to that future deck that we talked about that made day 2. A good Pokemon search card in that deck is Techno Radar. Mm-hmm. All you have to do is just discard a card from your hand, and you can look for 2 future Pokemon. So that's basically, it's not. I would say it's a combination of Tera Orb with Buddy-Buddy Poffin. So you're getting the two Pokemon out that you need. You're not necessarily putting it in onto your bench, but you can get something that's not a low HP. So you can get two Iron Hands EX or an Iron Crown with an Iron Thorns or whatever combination those are, and that's a great way to get those out of your deck, get them into play, and it's only specific for that type of deck, just like Tera Orb.
Yeah, absolutely. And keep in mind, whenever a kind of a sub arc or subset or a sub archetype comes into Pokemon, so Pokemon likes to do these mini blocks every 2 to 3 sets. So we see this right now with the future and ancient Pokemon. We're seeing it with Terra Pokemon. There's going to be search for those types of cards built within those sets as well. So if Pokemon introduces a new type, so obviously we know trainer Pokemon are coming in future sets. Well, there's going to be support that are going to be Pokemon search for that set. So don't just pigeonhole yourself into the general Pokemon search. Definitely dig into the card pool and look for cards of that same archetype or same subset and see where those synergies lie to take advantage of as many different opportunities to thin those your deck to find those Pokemon as possible.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned like going, looking into the future because we already know of an example coming out with Hop.
Mm-hmm.
There's an item called Hop's Bag, and you find two Hops Pokemon. So, as we mentioned in a previous episode, Pokemon loves recycling ideas, and Pokemon Search is a core concept that they love to recycle in different ways.
Yeah, so obviously we're talking about the meta and the format that we are existing in when we're having this conversation, but we also want to make sure that when it comes to deck building theory and deck building kind of concepts, we're looking beyond the present. We're always looking into the future and into the past to give us an idea of how and what we need to be preparing for to make sure that our decks are going to be the most efficient as they can be.
Yeah, and I think another resource we can talk about when it comes to getting Pokemon into play or getting Pokemon into our hand is we haven't talked about stadiums yet, but that's another good resource to help build your bench.
Yes, and we're going to talk about stadiums more in depth in a future part of this because I think so many deck builders and TCG players overlook the value of the stadium slot in the deck. But there's historically been a lot of really good stadiums that basically allow you free search every single turn. An old card was that was played when I was really grinding the circuit was Brooklet Hill. Brooklet Hill is a pretty. I think it's banned in GLC now.
It's not.
But it's not.
Nope, because
Okay.
I used to play that card when I had a water deck.
So Brooklet Hill says that you basically every single turn the player, whoever turn it is, they can search for their deck for a water or fighting Pokemon. Free search from the stadium slot. No discard, no punishment. You just get to do it. And because your deck is a private source of knowledge, even if you know you don't run water or fighting type, you can say Brooklet Hill and just go into your deck to see what's in there. It allows you an opportunity to search your deck there too. But that's another way of just getting Pokemon search from another area of the board instead of your hand or from the other methods. Like if you have a free turn to do it, go try to find something.
Yeah, a more modern example is Artisan. Artisan is a great stadium to have if you have a lot of non-rule box Pokemon. What it reads is you basically search your deck for a basic Pokemon that doesn't have a rule box and put it onto your bench. So as long as you have the bench spot for it, it is a great way to, one, grab that Pokemon that you need, two, get information on what's in your deck all in one turn. You're not paying a cost to it. It's okay, there's a stadium. And also, hint with stadiums, it doesn't have to be yours.
Yeah.
You can use your
Absolutely.
opponent's stadium. So if you don't play Artisan, your opponent has it, use it. Even if it's not, even if you don't have any basic Pokemon, say for instance you're playing that Future Box. I know we keep mentioning it, but in this instance, it's actually a really good example. You can play Artisan just to gather information. You don't have to pull it out. It's private knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
But
Absolutely.
I will say, be cautious. Know what format you're playing in. Some formats or some stores may have house rules. So, for instance, I know Devin, you talked about Brooklyn Hill. It didn't get banned, but if you're not playing a water or fighting deck, you can't use Brooklyn Hill and GLC.
Gotcha.
Be-
That's where the rule I saw was then.
yeah, it's because we all know you don't have. If you're playing like a metal deck, you're not going to have water Pokemon. It's basically against. Sorry, I knocked over my mic. Um, but yeah, so that you have to know what format you're playing in. For the point of this discussion, we're talking about the standard format, so there isn't really a limitation on that. For Artisan, the only limitation is if you have a full bench, you can't use it. But figure out what stadiums benefit you, and if you can use a stadium for Pokemon search, by all means, go for it. Another good stadium for that really is Grand Tree. It is the A-Spec card, so you can only have one of those in your deck. But if you play the Grand Tree, you can evolve a basic all the way up to a stage 2 for free. You don't have to have the cards in hand. As long as you're in your deck, you can evolve your little old Pidgey to a Pidgeot EX. So knowing the stadium resources you have out there can be another way to build your bench up as well.
Yeah. So we kind of just went over just the concept of Pokemon search today. Just wanted to kind of hit the key points. We wanted to hit the common cards that you'll see. I'm going to take a wild assumption that Ultra Ball will never rotate. So Ultra Ball will probably be a 3 to 4 of in almost any deck ever, just to be 100% honest. It's a card that will probably never ever rotate. So
It
if you're
did for a
listening to
little
this,
bit, but we had other ways of getting Pokemon
I
out.
think it rotated for all of like
Three,
one set, right?
like 2-3 years, but nothing more
Was
than
it
that.
out for 2?
Yeah, right around when you stopped playing, it rotated out.
Oh, that's why. Because I stopped playing. Okay,
Yeah.
that sounds right. That checks out. But else, anyone would have said the same thing about like double color its energy, and we haven't had double color its energy in standard for like almost 5 years now.
Yeah, we all missed that.
Cards you think will never rotate that actually do. But anyway, so definitely just concepts to keep in mind when deck building. And with that, we are going to go shift into the deck of the week and talk about how we use these same concepts into our deck building, into our basically our general game plan. This week, like we talked about, we are going to be focusing on Flareon EX. So Flareon EX is a card from Prismatic Evolutions. It is an evolution. It is a stage 1 fire type EX with 270 HP that evolves from Eevee. It is a Tera Pokemon, but it's not a different Tera. It's a fire Tera. And it has 2 different attacks. The first one is Fire Colors, Burning Charge, does 130 base damage, and search your deck for 2 basic energy cards and attach them to one of your Pokemon, and then shuffle your deck. So this one's fun. You can always just power yourself up if you ever wanted to. And then the fun attack, with these Tera Pokemon, I'm just going to call them the fun attacks because they have the weird energy costs, is for a Fire, Water, and Lightning. It does 280. It's Carnelian, and you just can't attack next turn. This Pokemon just can't attack next turn. It's a very typical text we see in a lot of cards. We've seen that text for many years now. So that is the focus of the deck. So how do we get set up, and what are we setting up to make sure this Flareon deck works and is fun and is functional?
Yeah,
So
so
first off, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, to do that, I know we mentioned it before. The support Pokemon in this list is we have the Noctowl line. We have different types of Eevees in here, but one fun
Mhm.
Pokemon that you included that I actually think is really really cool is that Victini.
Yes, so this is the Victini. It is a 70 HP basic fire Pokemon.
That number is
And the reason,
important, by the way, in this conversation. Go ahead.
yeah, so we'll go about, obviously, that's part of some of the stuff why we picking this card. It has the ability Victory Cheer. And this ability reads, attacks used by your evolution fire Pokemon do 10 more damage to your opponent's active before applying weakness and resistance. So obviously, you could attack. It has an attack for a fire colorless flare for 30 damage, but we're never going to attack with it. But it is a great damage modifier for Flareon because of some other damage modifiers and damage HB modifiers we will be talking about in a moment. But Dean's absolutely right. It being 70 HP is perfect because we run 3 Buddy-Buddy Poffins.
Oh yeah.
So in the beginning phases of the match, our Buddy-Buddy Puffin targets are a basic Eevee. We use the boosted evolution Eevee because I like just the capability of evolving turn 1 if it's in the active spot because of Flareon's first attack being 130 and energy acceleration. If you can do that, I prefer that. It kind of matches my playstyle. I know, Dean, you prefer the 70 HP Eevee, that you would prefer to just slow down just one more turn.
I
But
prefer
again,
not
both
to
of
get
those,
knocked out by Dragapult. Yes.
yes. So both of those, however, are Buddy-Buddy Poffin targets. We have the Fan Rotom, which is a Buddy-Buddy Poffin target. We have the Hoothoot, that's a Buddy-Buddy Poffin target. And obviously the Eevee, the Hoothoot, and the Noctowl, because we mentioned that we are running the Jolt Seeker Noctowl, are Fan Rotom targets. So you see the combination of building, that we can build a deck very quickly with Buddy-Buddy Poffin. We also run 3 Nest Balls because we want to get basic Pokemon into play. The other Pokemon in the deck, we do run 1 Mew EX as a pivot and as a draw. We run 1 Fezandipiti EX. And we run 2 of the Eevee EX. And this is an interesting little synergistic piece that I liked because the Eevee EX and the Flareon EX, their secondary, their fun attack, that weird energy cost attack, is the same energy cost. So even if you don't have a Flareon in play, you can still use the Eevee EX and attack for 200 damage. So that's still a very important number. 200 does a lot of setup, and honestly can KO some important Pokemon in the format as well.
And at the very least, it can help prevent getting that easy donk from your opponent. Just because if you do start the 50 HP Eevee or really any other of the non EX Pokemon, it can get knocked out easily. 200 HP is much harder to do, so it's if you have to start with that, it's a nice safe option while you set up your bench. Okay, yeah, you lose 2 prizes if that gets knocked out, but at least your bench is set up and you can just go. Sometimes you have to have that sacrificial lamb when it comes to the early game. But yeah, the EX Eevee just offers another out to get your bench set up.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. To go over some of the other pieces of the deck, the ace spec of choice for this deck is Prime Catcher, and it's obviously it's Gust, but it's also Switch, which comes in the synergy with the Flareon EX's attack. We run, in terms of our supporters, we run 1 Boss. We do run 1 Briar, which I love because you could take 3 prizes unexpectedly, or you take 1 extra prize to get a 3 prize turn unexpectedly. The Crispin is great because the Crispin allows you to do that turn 1 attack with Flareon if you're set up well enough. Iono, obviously, for hand draw and hand disruption. It does run 1 Mela. So Mela is a supporter that you can only use if your previous Pokemon was knocked out. And you can attach basic fire energy from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon if you do draw 6. So you can accelerate a fire in a discard to one of our Pokemon and then draw 6, which is fantastic. And then the stadium slots for here, you run 1 Area 0 Underdepths. You could run more, but why run more? This card is in almost every other deck. So you really don't need to play it too often because you're usually utilizing your opponent's Area 0. But the stadium card that I really like in here is this Gravity Mountain, where stage 2 Pokemon get minus 30 HP. We don't run stage 2, so this stadium does not hurt us, but it makes Charizard one-shottable.
And
Because,
Dragapult and Garvor.
yeah, so it turns those like the beyond 300 HPs into the high 200, low 300s, and it turns Flareon into a one-shot machine. So it's really, really fun. I'm enjoying playing the deck. I don't know if you are.
I played a couple matches with it. I think I would personally do different edits to the list. Maybe I just had a bad time on my lunch break at work, and I hit some weird matchups. I played this Kingdra EX deck that had the Serena EXs, and I couldn't one-shot those because they also played the vanillish with the ability where if your opponent's Pokemon have like 40 HP or less, they can't attack. And I'm like, this is not fun at all. And then I played some other matches. They were close, but I would prefer maybe the B-Barrel line versus the Noctowl line. But everything else I think makes sense. Maybe I do the Sparkling Crystal instead of Mind Catcher. Just little tweaks for my gameplay style. But it is a fun deck. You are seeing a lot more Flareon out on the ladder. It's definitely I will say the best evolution. It's at least the most straightforward. It accelerates Pokemon like crazy. It hits hard. The Gravity Mountain is such a good addition to that list. It turns like unwinnable matchups to even just almost favorable in my opinion. But it is a fun deck. Maybe not for me, or at least I have to get to know the deck a little better. But I know we've been texting back and forth, and we're like, "Yeah, I love this deck. This is so much fun." So the fact that like you're having a fun time with this, kind of like how I had a fun time with the Sylveon deck last week. But yeah, just let us know what you all think about the Flareon deck. What edits you would do. What pieces you like about it. We'll have the showcase video uploaded on Friday, the day after this episode releases at lunchtime. So Friday, while you're eating your sandwich for lunch, go ahead and pop over to our YouTube channel, The Rogue Deck Chronicles, and take a look at that video and see how Devin plays this deck and how he sets up his bench, and you can see the concept of Pokemon search in a very good way.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really good point for the end of this is building a deck to your personality and your playstyle, right? I built this deck on how I like to play my decks and how I play just throughout the gameplay, how I'm looking at a game. And it is very different than how you look at a game. So when you're building your deck, you're picking your search, you're picking all these different elements we're talking about this whole series, right? Make sure that you are staying true to yourself and understanding how you like to play the game. Because if you do not have a good time with the deck, you can change. You can adapt that deck to fit what you want. That's the beauty of being the deck builder. You don't have to do what everyone else does. So apply these techniques, apply this to thought process, and build the deck that you're going to have the most fun with. Because not everyone will think the same way, and when it comes to in turns, looking at their routes, and they will always just look at that way that makes sense to them, and it may not be the same for you and your friend. So keep that in mind when you're picking your cards and building the deck, and then hopefully you will be able to enjoy the decks that you build and be able to have fun and express that fun to other people.
Yeah, so let us know what you think about the Rogue Deck of the Week. Take a look at our YouTube channel. We do have this episode on YouTube if you want to do it with that social media platform. And I'm actually kind of excited. We're me and Devin have been working in the background, and we're coming up with some ideas to help mature this podcast and the YouTube channel portion of it. So keep an eye out on some new additions coming out soon. We don't have a date yet, but we have a lot going on in the background that we're excited about, and we can't wait for y'all to see it.
Absolutely. And then with that as well, we wanted to enhance the experience for our listeners and our viewers. We wanted to be able to make it more accessible for everyone. So we are looking on and working on ways on doing that for everyone, and really trying to bring the experience to be more than just an audio platform. We want to make sure that individuals who are not audio learners have an opportunity to see and hear what we're talking about. So we are definitely trying to help with different learning styles and just trying to help different people and how they comprehend information. That way they can be the best player they can be.
Absolutely, and put a comment in under in the YouTube channel. Let us know like what you would like us to do, how we can enhance this podcast and the YouTube channel. We'll take those suggestions. We'll try our best to implement that. Obviously, this is not our full-time gig. We both have full-time jobs doing something completely different than this. But
Yes.
yeah. So, but we're learning. We're trying to make this the best resource that we can be. I feel like this series is very informational, it is very, yeah, very informational. So if we need to repeat something, let us know. Like, we know we're dumping a lot of stuff on y'all, but it's coming from a place of we want to see people grow. We want to see the art of deck building become alive again in the Pokemon community. And really it's helping us out as players as well. So we're taking these lessons, we're applying it to how we do stuff, i.e. the rogue deck of the week. But we want to see you all grow too, because we both are professors in the Pokemon community, and that is what we're here to do.
Mm-hmm. So that being said, Dean, do you have anything else you want to add before we head out and get to enjoy a wonderful weekend?
No, I'm good. I'm just getting ready for a nice relaxing weekend. I'll be playing some GLC tomorrow, and probably be building some more decks like I always do. Well, what about for you?
Honestly, I'm going to go play around with more deck types. I've been kind of researching what other people are doing with the card pool. I'm going to play more pocket because there's a new event and I just need to grind more of the pocket stuff. But really, that's all I'm going to be doing. Like I said, my Shiny Hunter friends, we are freaking out over Shiny Mythicals. So we're probably going to be doing that more this weekend. And just kind of relaxing because this is my last weekend before I'm going to soccer games almost every other week because my season tickets are about to kick in. So
Nice.
I'm definitely taking advantage of before I'm yelling at the top of my lungs for a soccer game. So
Awesome. Well, thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Rogue Deck Chronicles. And yeah, we'll see y'all next week. And as a reminder, have fun playing those sneaky decks.
have a great day, guys.